Are you consulting for Taylor Swift these days? What's happening? This is very Taylor Swift-like.
This is amazing. I'm
on my A game today. I'm on my A game. That's why.
I like it. Oh my gosh. Hey, it's Nicole. Welcome back to the Serial Entrepreneur Show. So glad to have you listening in today, especially for today's guest. I know I say it every single time, but Brandy Whalen is a really special mix of entrepreneur and co-founder to all the people we talk to every single day inside of our inbox, my inbox and the editors too. She is co-founder of Wildcast and Kitcaster. So Kitcaster sends us so many incredible guests that you've listened to already, and she's one of the brains behind that, as well as Wildcast. I'm going to let her explain a little bit more about Wildcast is. We talked about it in a previous episode, but it's helping small podcasts, get monetized in a better way than they ever could before. And so I'm excited to hear how that launch has gone and what she's doing and who they're working with. But more than anything, she's a mom of 3 teenage boys. My goodness, how is she doing all of that with 3 kiddos too?
Hey, if you're an entrepreneur who usually fast forwards intros just like this one, this is the podcast for you.
Serial Entrepreneurs.
Hey, just a reminder, our show is brought to you by Smart Cookie Media, where we believe data tells a story, and not just any story, your business story. As a subscriber to the show or as a client, you'll get insights on profitable, data-driven marketing strategies that work for you and your business, your industry, not some cookie cutter trends. No, ideas that are led by your customer data so you know they'll work for you. Connect with me on LinkedIn or Instagram to learn more. Everything's in the show notes. Now, let's get back to the show. Brandy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So glad to have you. Let's get started the way we do with every single guest. Tell me, how would you finish the sentence? You know you're an entrepreneur when?
When people are sharing ideas with you or interests, and you immediately think of like 10 or 15 ways that they can monetize it. Nonstop.
Is there a story there? Do you remember one of the last ones somebody said? You were like, yes, go do it.
Honestly, okay, I had to stop myself from doing it because I always thought that people thought the same way that I did, right? Like I see something and I'm like, oh my gosh, like we could turn this into this business and we could do it this way and then we could do it that way and evolve into this. And when I would start to share that with people, I could tell immediately like anxiety was like quickly filling their body. And I'm like, oh, you're not thinking about that at all. You just want to be a therapist. You don't want to build a therapy empire. I am so sorry.
So good. Well, you are in the right place because we all think that way. People have told us that how one time they wondered why Amazon doesn't ship caskets. Was that it, Matt? Or if I'm remembering?
Caskets. Yeah. Drop ship caskets. Like, why are we shopping for caskets? Why aren't we drop shipping those by now?
So Brandy, tell us, what do you do? What businesses do you own or have you owned even in the past? Tell us what you're up to.
Yeah, you bet. Well, so my very first business was a school newspaper when I was in 4th grade. So, this bug has like been inside of me since I was little, which I'm assuming a lot of people, you too, the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Same.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that was my very first entrepreneurial venture, was a school newspaper.
So you created a newspaper out of thin air, like yourselves. Did you?
Yeah. Well, I had 2 friends that I convinced to also run the newspaper with me. I feel like they were kind of like, whatever. We were in 4th grade. So they were like, that sounds like a great idea, but we don't really know what we're doing. So we'll follow you. Yes.
Wait a second. We got to dig into that real quick here. I got to jump in here because here's what I got to know. All right. And I'm a biased person. I'll admit my bias to certain things, but I try to be unbiased. Here you are. You're jumping into the big time media world. I got to know, like, what was your agenda? Like, was it like 10 minutes more on recess, extra chocolate milk at lunch? Like, there was a big political agenda there behind the 4th grade newspaper, wasn't there?
Oh, gosh. You know what? I've never really thought about this, but okay. So yes, there was. I don't even really know how I got my hands on like Dear Abby, but I was obsessed with it. And I wanted to be Dear Brandy. So like a part of the section of the newspaper was that people could like slip notes inside my desk and like ask questions and I would answer them in the newspaper. So we would include other things like the lunch menu for the week, and we would do like a little bio of a teacher at the school. But really at the core, I wanted to get a little bit of the tea that was happening in the school and I wanted to give some advice to people. I wanted my advice column.
A little bit of sharing. Yeah, stories. Yeah.
Sounds like somebody was building a personal brand at 4th grade.
I know. Weird. So weird.
you know?
Yeah, I love it. Or just even wear branding, personal branding. This is amazing.
Yeah.
So you have to tell me, okay, so at 4th grade, I know I was running it
Yes.
myself. I definitely was the year I got my first set of business cards. My dad was like, what would you want to name something? So you have to tell me where'd that come from. Certainly your dinner conversations might have been a little different than others.
Yeah. So, I grew up in Iowa. My family, they were farmers and really kind of just hustlers. Like nobody went to college. They just did the things that they needed to do. Right. But they always, like my dad, my grandfather, they advanced up the ranks just by like hard work and grit and kind of like thinking outside the box. So I saw that growing up. And I think that just kind of sparked this curiosity and desire to want to do something. Always.
I love that. I love it. Because, man, I just feel like so many times we go about our 4th grade business, whatever it is, and we just think like, of course, doesn't everyone want to do this? Yeah, I want to own a business. To me, there was no other answer. I tried other answers for a little while. I tried those.
Yeah.
Yeah, she got
same.
fired. She got fired, by the way.
I did twice.
Yes, twice.
You're like, oh, I shouldn't be an employee.
Yeah. I was like, they love me and they don't want me to work for that. Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. I love when I even tell this story to some people that work with me now. They're like, wait, what? We would never have fired. Like, I would never. Right. And I'm like, yeah, I know. But I also wasn't in your business being like, this doesn't make financial sense. Why are you spending $500,000 and not doing anything? And they were like, yeah, okay. And then I was the thing that was like, yeah, if you're not going to let me work, then next. So it's true. That was a nice, good message for me to be like, okay, it's time. It's time.
Yeah.
So tell me, Brandy, what are you doing right now?
You bet. So about 5 years ago, and I know that you had my co-founder Ryan on a previous episode. I think he told a story, but I was like the mystery person that he was having lunch with. And now, and he had a podcast here in Denver, Colorado, where he would interview business owners. And I had a public relations firm. So a lot of my clients I would put onto his podcast. We became friends. We were having lunch and I was like, gosh, every time that my client goes on your podcast, they have so much fun. They have so much fun. And then I'm, getting them an article in the business journal or whatever. And they're kind of like, that's whatever. It was kind of boring. But like, they asked like standard questions and I answered them. But it was this conversation that they got to move outside of their talking points and into like what really drives them, outside motivations. They got to tell stories and you could just see them light up. So Ryan and I were having lunch. We're like, there's something there. Like we can build a business from this and really just focus in on podcasting. So that is when we decided to launch Kitcaster. We're, kind of like a PR firm, but we're only focused on podcasts. So when we're working with entrepreneurs, startup founders, C-suite executives, we're just putting them on podcasts that matter to them.
So, Matt, I don't know if you want to know, but I want to know what was for lunch. Steak tacos, possibly.
I wish I could remember. Oh my, you know what?
Ryan seems pretty healthy. If I recall, Ryan's not gonna, indulge in these vices that we,
don't let him fool you. Don't let him fool you.
Oh, okay.
He can indulge. Yeah. I'm actually pretty sure we were eating at this Creole restaurant called Lucille's. So we definitely had some gumbo. I'm pretty sure that's what was on the menu.
Good.
Yeah.
See, we need more Cajun cooking in our life, right? Or actually Creole. I want to make sure I'm saying it correctly to the folks down south there. We need more of that in our life, Nicole, because that's where these like genuine ideas. I don't know if it's spice.
So.
Tacos got us here, so
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
All right.
I think you should try it because I think it's the sweats. I think it's the spice sweats that like get you to the next level.
Yeah. Okay, there we go. Okay.
There's no takeaway. Yep, it'll end up at the end of the show for sure.
Gotta get the heat sweats going.
Somebody in the area. Oh my gosh. Right. So then what happened with it? Was a previous business that you had or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So I had a PR for a very small boutique and I started out doing contract work where I would just kind of be assisting other larger PR firms. And then I had a few small clients. I mean, the pandemic hit and like wiped me out.
Yeah.
And it was the perfect time.
Yeah.
I mean, it was terrible.
Yes.
But at that very moment, Ryan and I were also starting Kitcaster. So I was still holding my traditional PR firm while building Kitcaster. I think that is one thing that for entrepreneurs, could kind of keep your day job while you're building this passion project that hopefully then will turn into something bigger.
Or get severance, just saying, just throwing it out there.
Yeah, or get severance. That's a great way to maneuver through this. Yes. Okay. So one of those two things. And Ryan was doing the same thing. He had a marketing agency in Denver. And he was still doing that. So we were both doing our 9 to 5 while we were building this. And then we just started to continue to get traction on the Kitcaster side. The pandemic hit. Ryan did most of his work in restaurants. So that was tricky. And then a couple of commerce clients that I had were just like, you know what, we got to put a pause on things. And I was like, this is a sign. We need to go all in on this.
Nice.
Yeah.
So yeah. So that's when we did. And really just kind of reaching out to our networks. A lot of the people that Ryan had on his podcast were in the B2B space. And same with me. I had a couple e-commerce clients, but I had a lot in the B2B space as well. So we really kind of just went all in. And podcasts are just such a great way, especially in the B2B world. It's hard to find good marketing tactics. But if you have something that is sometimes difficult to explain or has a long sales cycle, podcasts are great for that.
Yeah, definitely.
So let's walk into that a little bit more, because hearing what you both were working on, very service-based, right? Very transactional. Things have to get done before other things have to get done. Maybe retainers are involved, things like that. But then you step into this other agency world, right? What was that like? Because there were still things to do. And certainly all the PR things had to get done and the marketing things had to get done for the new business. But what was that like, even just for your own shift in your own headspace? But then also the doing changed, right? The doing radically changed. I mean, Troy emails. Troy and emails, right? So tell me about that.
Yeah. In the moment, we actually had no idea what we were doing and how to scale this company, like many entrepreneurs. So we took on a couple beta clients and we were like, all right, here's the deal. We're going to do a 3-month retainer and we're going to book you on 9 podcasts. And the moment that we started our work, we were like, how are we going to do this and do this at scale? So we ended up bringing on 2 people actually to kind of help with that work. And then figuring out too, just what kind of tools we wanted to be using, the processes. And Ryan is a very process-oriented human. I do not think that way. I'm like, here's a great idea. Now you go do it. So yeah.
Don't know anybody like this, Nicole. We know nobody like this.
Yes. Here, Matt, this way. Yeah.
Yes,
And Ryan is so great. He built a process for sales. He built a process for delivery. And it was so funny because one of our very first employees, we got 9 podcasts for a client. And he was like, I think that this is it. There's no more podcasts to be had here. And I'm like, oh yeah, there are.
Oh yeah.
There are a lot of podcasts to be had here. The biggest challenge, in the world of PR, there's tools to find reporters, their contact information, who covers what beat. This didn't exist in the podcast world. So it was a lot of digging, and we had to kind of build our own tools and resources to be able to, at scale, connect our clients with great shows that fit their industry and their knowledge, which is different for everyone that we onboard. It's really funny because that client that our employee thought 9 was it, we're done, we can't do any more, it's impossible, I think ended up going on 88 podcasts.
Oh my gosh.
Wow. Our entire world shut down. And the people who were going to conferences, who were doing in-person networking, that didn't exist anymore. So it was a perfect time for folks. That was traditionally how they got in front of their audience, to turn to podcasts. So we saw this huge surge of interest because it was almost like educating people on the value of being a guest on podcasts. If they weren't introduced to that previously, it was a lot of convincing, this is how this can work for you. But once the pandemic hit and things shut down, they realized quickly how podcasts could work for them. So our messaging and our value prop changed quite a bit. We grew, we exploded during that time and ended up hiring quite a few employees, which was difficult because we hadn't really trained remotely before. We weren't really a remote team, but we had to change the way that we did things very quickly. That's really kind of the role that I fell into, was more hiring, training, employee management, and then also coaching our clients, just because I do come from the world of public relations and helping with media training. But it's very different in podcasts, as you can imagine, because we're more like conversation, storytelling, and in traditional media training, it's like stick to the points.
Right.
Don't
Right.
stray from the points.
You bring up a great point, because I think podcast guests have gotten better. I mean, me and Nicole talk about it all the time. I think it's also our quality of interviewing has gotten better too. But
Yes.
if we go back to our first 10 interviews, especially if you're talking like coaches or people used to speaking from stage, and they're used to like delivering their sales message and delivering their benefits and key features. It's like, positioning that and getting people to understand, like, okay, you don't talk like that on a podcast. Like, you have to start to tell a story that people are going to lean into, that's going to, keep it on the dial, if they're on the dial. Like, people are doing that anymore, but you know what I'm trying to say. On the line is what I just said. Didn't I just say on the dial? Like, yeah. All right. I'll just stop talking now.
Well, so, okay, you brought up a point. Let me fine point it.
There you go. Yeah. Clean it up.
This
for
is a
me
little behind the scenes for us. So you said like podcast guests got better. I think we got better at finding the right guests. And really the way we did it is a couple agencies, Kitcaster, one of the top. I'd say that there are two favorites if my team were to be here right now. So only two. But there's a few others out there that were like, please, nobody else from that person again. But we got better at being like, wait, these agencies are legit. Like, they're sending us people who are legit. And they ask us, are you interested in any of these four? And we're like, well, yeah, we like 2 and 4, and 3 would work out. And so when we realized there are really great referral sources for us to have better guests, because those first 10, Matt, we were like, hey, who do we know that would be interesting or knows how to tell a story? And frankly, some of them never got published.
Some of them we couldn't shut up too. Don't forget.
Right.
Some of them we're like, oh my God, it's like 2.5 hours of this. Like, okay, we have to figure out a better way.
I mean, Brandy, imagine this, what you do and how you've coached guests, right? Or like your clients. I was doing that on shows while Matt is texting me like, this is a snore fest. Like, where I was like, do you have a story about that? Could you tell me more? I would be doing that like in live time. And then I was the one who was getting up at 3:30 a.m. and editing before we brought on our editor. She's fantastic, because it was like, okay, we got to figure this out. How do I make 2 hours go down to anything somebody wants to listen to? So podcast guests didn't just get better. We got better at finding the right ones and finding partners like you all over there to give us some good ones. So thank you.
And for the record, Brandy, no texts have been exchanged between me and Nicole during the filming of this episode today.
Yes.
None.
Good.
Nothing during this recording today.
I haven't seen any yawning yet.
Yeah, I was like, I'm like, Nicole, you're going to make her self-conscious then if you say that.
I felt like this was a safe one. So what was the sales process? If you guys were usually doing one-to-one sales retainers, or you're doing webinars, how were you finding your clients?
Well, we were doing a lot of cold email outreach, actually. I know. And we
totally cold, or like you knew them through their
totally cold. But that is honestly like really what grew our business. We use PitchBook. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, but it's a really great place for us, because a lot of times when people have just recently received funding, especially those in the technology space, they understand the importance of building their brand.
Right.
And podcast guesting is very much a top of the funnel sort of marketing activity. So that is the ideal place. Like, people don't even know they exist in the world. So building their name, their personal name, their company name, they really understand the importance of that. And then LinkedIn, that was kind of right when all of the LinkedIn marketing strategies, like, we're starting now, people are like, I can't handle another cold outreach over LinkedIn. And I actually think that has probably tightened a bit too from just regulations, but it was very successful for us. And then just putting content out, going on podcasts ourselves, that was hilarious, because we got like a year into it. And we're like, wait a second, we're telling our clients to go on podcasts. Maybe that's an activity that we should also be. Seems like a very easy thing for us to be doing. So, but that's really how it grew.
Know that we've had you both. I remember when Ryan's name came in, I was like, oh, they didn't put the guest email on here again. Oh man, I gotta ask them. And I was like, wait a minute, the bio is this guy. And Kitcaster email? Wait, what? Yeah, I remember us being planners.
Putting it all together.
Yes, it was cool. It was cool. Yeah.
And then when somebody said, like, Brandy wants to come on, and then Ryan came back with it, but he wants to come back on too. I was like, friends, Awesome. Love it. I
Awesome.
love it. But yeah, the first time I was
well, this is a great show. So who
Oh,
wouldn't want
thank
to
you.
come on and come on a second and
Thank
third
you.
time?
Thank you. That
Yeah.
means a lot, especially from, well, dear Brandy.
Dear Brandy, yes.
Thank you. I
So-
appreciate that.
Okay, so tell me, what are you working on? Because, man, what we know on this show is there's always more than one thing happening. There's either a squirrel or there is an awesome distraction or another lunch date, maybe. Tell me,
Yeah.
what are you working on? Tell me maybe a little bit about Wildcast.
Yes. Okay. So we had been thinking about just different ways that we could come into the podcast space, right? We're doing this guesting thing, but what are some other ways that we can be of service? And it just so happened that, gosh, it's been about a year and a half now. I got a LinkedIn connection from a woman who actually runs a podcast network. And she had been working on this project. And she was like, I kind of feel like I want partners. Like, I kind of feel like I've taken this maybe as far as I can go. I really like the work you're doing. You know, I've worked with your employees. You have great guests. Like, I think we can do something really great together. And at that same time, we had been thinking about like, well, how can we get into the advertising world of podcasting, which is a weird, it's so young. It has a lot of growth that needs to happen in that space. But we were just seeing these big, massive shows get these huge advertising deals. But, just so many of the great shows that we work with that aren't armchair expert. It's not Dax Shepard as the host.
Right.
But they're great shows. They have loyal listeners. They're probably listeners who are exactly who you need to be talking to for your particular service, product, whatever it might be. So how can we start to integrate advertising? So we teamed up with a couple others and started Wildcast and officially launched just this year. And really trying to give brands, B2B brands, the space and an opportunity to engage with podcasts that matter to them. Because big society and culture podcasts,
Right.
that's not going to be of value to a cybersecurity firm.
Right.
I mean, maybe it might be, but really, like, their audiences are living in very different places. So we
Right.
want to make sure that they can get in front of those audiences and give podcasts that maybe don't have a giant listenership the opportunity to monetize. So
Yeah.
that's Wildcast.
Yeah, I agree, because like the B2B listener, if they're listening to hear like either the how to or hey, I'm not alone, or really like there's a guest that they know that is in their community in some other way that they're like, yeah, let me hear what that's about. Or even another founder that they barely know, but they're going to get to know at a conference or something. It's a great way to, legally spy folks on your friends or your almost friends. It's a great way to have just some insight in. And then if advertisers are right here, like PitchBook, we've already mentioned them once, and powerful opportunity that more of our people should know about. And
we've done some very strategic product placement. Come on, we dunking on the last show. I was trying it from the angle to get the dunking, not even blocking the word.
Really, you guys are out there doing, the Lord's work of trying to find advertisers who are like, you guys need more impressions. We have access to this network, and here, let's find a way to matchmake. I'm a little confused, I'll be honest, in general, not with your brand, what you do, but in general, on the Wild Wild West, I'll call podcast data, because I remember one of the agencies sent somebody and said something like, yeah, they sent us because you're in the top 4% of business podcasts. And I was like, nobody told me, but I'll take it. And I remember like looking it up and being like, wow, they only actually work with those that are ranked. And I was like, I don't know where they're finding out. And yes, I've looked at Raphonic, or I've looked at some of these other ones, and I'm like, I don't really know whether I can trust that data or know that data. I'm flattered, of course, but I want to know, so of course, brag, things like that. But you guys are really, trying to, figure out a lot of those things at the same time, it seems.
Yeah, that's like kind of our biggest thorn, right? On both the agency, like Kitcaster side and Wildcast side, because that is what everyone wants. Every marketer wants to know, what's the data?
Numbers.
What are the numbers? What are the numbers? And this is one of those activities that's really hard. So for Wildcast, the podcast that we end up engaging with, they're kind of required to report. They have to self-report, but then they also have to take screenshots of their various platforms where they gather information and upload. There's a lot of legwork that goes into it, hoping to streamline that further down. But for right now, where we're at as a company, that's just a lot of the work we're doing behind the scenes, just being totally candid. It's really funny because even from our clients' perspective, they're like, well, you have to know some sort of data. And I'm like, this information is not publicly available.
No.
And I'm sure even just as a podcaster, it's oftentimes hard because you're streaming on so many different platforms.
Right.
Now you have YouTube in the mix. Like it's so hard. And like podcasts have a long shelf life. When I find a podcast I love, I go deep.
Same.
Right.
And even if there was a way to get some type of data, there just really isn't if they're just going to stream, if they're just going to just grab a listen. You know, everyone thinks like, oh, but downloads, oh, but subscribes. Yeah, but there's plenty of things that I listen to on the regular that I probably haven't clicked a button that they would really appreciate. So I try to make sure I do. But I'm just saying, I'm sure there are some that I'm like, oh, yeah, I'll just come back there. I'll remember. And in many cases, I do because they're true crime and they creep me out in the best possible way on a dark night walk. Yeah. But those things, like, we just aren't going to have that. And that's okay. There's probably a rule of thumb, maybe eventually we'll come to know that it'll be like, kind of like when you hire the contractor, expect a 15% contingency, like expect a little bit, reserve some of your part. Yeah.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. And here's the deal. I think advertising is a little bit different, but for the guesting side, it's really about content. I believe getting in front of the right audience, getting amazing content. I mean, here I've talked about things that I haven't talked about before. That's great content for us to use on all of our social channels. I think for a lot of brands, guesting on podcasts is a content play.
You are like the queen of podcasts to me. That's how I view you, Brandy.
Well, thank you.
So
the queen of podcasts. I like that. I'm changing my title.
I want to see the new business card. Okay. Next week.
Put in parentheses behind it, Dear Brandy, too. Just throwing it out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Your alias out there, right?
Totally.
Yeah. I'm hoping people send me some snail mail, with questions that they want me to answer.
Yeah,
I will gladly do
You
it.
can do the thing where, like, you subliminally, you answer the question on random podcasts and people don't even know you're doing it. And you send it out to your network and you say to people, hey, I got a Dear Brandy letter and I was just on the Serial Entrepreneur show. I answered the question in the middle of the show and they didn't even know it.
Are you consulting
You're a genius, Matt.
What's happening? Are you consulting for Taylor Swift these days? What's happening? This is very Taylor Swift-like.
This is amazing. I'm
on my A game today. I'm on my A game. That's why.
I like it. Oh my God. Okay. So talk to me about how those that are over here trying to grow podcasts, B2B, right? We're not crime, but tell us for B2B, because it is hard, what are a few ways that you're telling podcasters, here's how to get those numbers up. Here are some things that just are the best rules of thumb. We'll certainly want to share it with some of the hosts that have been on our show too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think sharing the content, I think you'd be really surprised at how many hosts don't share the content on your personal networks.
I have heard this because when we send the links to your guests who have been on with us and we include some videograms so they can share it, we've heard like, oh, your first have done that. But you know what, though? Some guests still don't share their own episodes.
So painful. So painful. Yeah, I know. You give them everything they need and they still don't do it. There's like a barrier there. But share the content. My goodness, you have it. It's amazing. Share it. I also think like guesting on other people's podcasts is a great way to drive people back to your podcast because it is the same ecosystem. Yeah. I think it's really hard when your call to action takes you out of the podcast ecosystem. You know, people are usually listening to a podcast while they're driving, while they're walking the dog, they're doing dishes. To ask them to get onto a website and click a thing and do another thing, like that's kind of unreasonable. But if you are in the same ecosystem, your podcast host, go on other podcasts.
Yeah, I love that.
One thing we need to get into the show today, if the queen of podcasting is here with us, how in the world do you manage Ryan and the business? And then you have these other three human beings that probably rely on you in some capacity. How is that whole balance thing working out?
There is no such thing as balance. That was always something that I would get so angry at. People are like, oh, it's a work-life balance. And like, there's no such thing. I mean, here's the deal. Like sometimes work takes more, sometimes life takes more. And I just kind of have given myself permission to realize that of like, sometimes my family is going to need me more. And I just need to like shut work down and deal with that. And sometimes work's going to need more. I've been lucky enough that like it's worked out so that it kind of feels like there's never really been a time where they both have like really need, like the really extreme moments when you're like, oh, these things really need me. I try really hard to kind of wind things down. I like to be there for my kids after school as much as possible, especially when they're teenagers. I think that that is a really important time to connect with them. So I try to make myself available, even if it's just like making them sandwiches between school and practice. If I can catch anything, like even a glance from them in between their life, I'm happy. I just like protecting myself, I think, more than anything, of just like not overextending as much as humanly possible.
So let's talk about that. You were in this doing space, this transactional space of PR and boutique firms. So that sounded pretty small to me, whether it was just you and a couple people. And then you went into this, at some point, you weren't the transactional doing the same way anymore. What was that shift like for you? In some ways, it sounds divine. So do tell me.
It is divine. It is hard because it is your baby and you want to have control, or at least I do. But it was so important to be able to step away. I think finding key people in your organization that you can trust and who want the challenge. There are some people that just want to show up to work, do the thing, and be done. And then there are some people that want to show up to work and like want to own the thing, like manage the thing. And those are the people that you need to have in your organization in order for you to kind of take a step back a bit.
Yeah.
I love that. Tell me, is there a key lesson you've learned as an entrepreneur? Maybe it's a mantra you find yourself saying again and again.
Yeah, well, this is something that I think Ryan kind of instilled in our company, and something that I've carried is assume positive intent always, especially in an age where we're doing a lot of email communication. You're getting a lot of text messages. It's really hard to get to the heart of like, what is this person feeling on the other end?
Yeah.
So that is something that I really try hard to do every day. I'm going to assume positive intent. If I get something snappy, I'm just going to assume that that person's having a rough day. And instead of thinking about how it's affecting me, thinking about the other person and like, how can I help them out?
I think the ball of positivity that I am, Nicole, being the lawyer that I am. Yes, I think that's probably a good thing I should start to look towards because, especially in the written word as a lawyer, I tend to assume the negative most of the time. I'm like, they're being very intentional. I know the exact words. They thought about it. They called their lawyer before they would send me that 5-word text message. So yeah, I'll have to adopt that. I think that's a pretty good mantra to live by. Good job, Ryan. How would you define your entrepreneurial success? Like, how would you define that moment where you say like, we've made it or I've made it? What's that look like for you?
Well, for me, it was being able to sleep like 7 consecutive nights without waking up thinking, what ball did I drop today? what needs to be taken care of? So that feels like a huge success. I think I have accomplished that. Most nights I sleep beautifully, good sleeper now. But it took me a while to get there, I will say. I feel like as entrepreneurs, you carry a lot on your shoulders and it can be really stressful. And it seems like that nighttime, like the witching hour of when everything kind of like comes in and takes over. So I guess that would be success, is now I sleep and it's beautiful.
On that note, we would like to remind all of our friends out there the joys of ZQuil and our friends over at Johnson & Johnson. So Johnson, if our friends at Johnson & Johnson are listening today, we would be happy to ensure many of our entrepreneurial listeners get 7 straight nights of great sleep.
Or sleep number. I mean, I love my number.
Oh, yeah.
That's good. And the margins, the profit margins in beds. Good job. I like it better.
And I hear they're already in the podcasting space. So come on over. Brandy, where do we connect with you? Where can we put some things in the show notes for people to find out about Dear Brandy, but also where they can connect with you, maybe through LinkedIn, or learn more about Kitcaster and signing up with your services there so they can also be here?
Yeah. So you can go to our website, kitcaster.com. And on that website, if you're not ready to take the plunge and like engage with Kitcaster, we have a ton of great resources. You can learn how to book yourself on podcasts. We have like a how-to guide. You can learn how to use AI to develop prompts to help you be a better podcast guest. There's lots of good resources. So just get on there, take a peek around, and feel free to email me, Brandy with a Y, very important, at Kitcaster. I would love to reignite Dear Brandy. So if you want to email me any sort of issue you're struggling with, I would be happy to get back to you. And, as Matt said, I may just drop the answers in upcoming podcast interviews.
Oh, yeah, a little Easter egg born right here because that's what we do here. Random idea. Well, Brandy, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate you.
Thanks,
This has been awesome. Thank you so much.
Hey, it's Nicole, and that's the end of the interview. But stick around. This is the part where Matt and I break it all down and give you our favorite takeaways. Listen in. Okay, so takeaway number 1, Creole.
Well, I think the exact words were the heat sweats, not meat sweats, the heat sweats. So we could go back to, the hot sauce and the salsa and the tacos with us. We could.
Now we're going to find it. We're going to find a spot around here, and we're going to go do
Creole?
that. And
It'll be awesome.
And hey, who knows what idea we're going to come up with? I mean, I'm just saying.
Yeah, exactly.
Who knows? She brought up how important it is to have a content play, like for B2B, even a personal brand, but for businesses to have a way to get out content that isn't just the talking points. And she said on how clear it is that podcasts are exactly that. She said stuff here today, and we've gotten lots of other people to say the same, that they said things today on our show that they don't always say somewhere else. I've always said, I don't want us to be like Diane Sawyer or another journalist that just gets what someone else is going to say. Or actually, I do want what Diane Sawyer would pull out of somebody, I guess.
Right.
And we do get those different pieces. And I think B2B, and I think I know this because you sometimes struggle with this and have shared with us on the show, they don't know how it fits into their marketing plan exactly when they share a story about they spilled something on a shirt and why that should matter or why they should share that. And I think what she said is it's a content play to grab those snackable pieces that are total gems to share with your audience because it pulls them in closer to you, especially if it is a long sales cycle, especially if it is,
what I was gonna say.
Right? Like something that you've got to reach back out to them anyways. You may as well have, even if they're mini shows. We've produced a show for a wealth advisor. They are short 6 to 10 minute shows because he thinks he'll bore people if they're much longer, but they're quick and easy to consume and all approved by his broker, right? Because there's a lot of rules for some people and regulations. And I think it's so helpful to get to see that person, the way they blink, the way they talk, the way they interact, on whether or not you can trust them. And so I think her saying that was really powerful.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that too. When she said, just imagine it, your sales cycle, like on so much stuff in the B2B world, is so long. And frankly, depending on how you present yourself during that sales process, I mean, when you're trying to close or whatever, if you've seeded the offer because they've listened to you talk about certain obstacles or you've already overcome those objections because you've got that messaging out there consistently and not through your traditional, objection, overcome the objection, like in the sales close. No, through storytelling of talking about how you've helped other clients, which it was brilliant the way she laid it out today. I would agree. Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's
so smart. What else you got? Any other takeaways?
The positive mantra, always assume positivity is the way I took it. I forget the exact word. You assume positive intent.
And I thought that would speak to your heart.
Yes, it did. It did. This is something we have dialogue on and we're seeing each other. We're looking at each other. Right. I'm watching this unfold in my neighborhood with kids as they start to communicate with one another. And one person says, I want you to be nice. And the other person's going, well, I'm not being mean. I'm just saying what I'm thinking or whatever. And they're learning how to communicate with each other. And so as adults, we would like to think that we all communicate, especially in business with one another, or especially when we're in the same company working together, that we are communicating effectively between one another. But even when we're doing it verbally, even when we're doing it live in person, even when we're doing it virtual, sometimes we don't get it and we don't do it right. Move that to the written word. Oh my gosh, people can't even, write a letter anymore, right? Let alone,
Right. I
thought that was huge.
Yeah, no, I love that one. I think maybe I'm trying to think of how the pastor who married Kyle and I 17 years, anyway, a long time ago. I think he said it differently. I think he phrased it differently, but it was always assume the best. I'll have to look it up. I'll have to go take a picture and share it out because as long as you're assuming the best in each other, or it was outgive or something. Anyways, just always this idea of don't read it with this filter of they're coming at you, right? There's so many times we all revert back to this little kid moment that we all had like, oh, something's wrong. I do that all the time. Like if you were to text me like, hey, we need to talk, I'd be like, oh man, what did I do? How am I in trouble? I'm going to the principal's office, right? Yeah. You'd be like, no, I have this deal on some place that you and Ashley always have good deals on travel. And that's what I should be thinking. I should be assuming you're sending me to Greece. Like you're like, hey, Nicole, there's a yacht with your name on it. You and Kyle get it. Yeah, that's what I
celebrate 18 years. There you go. There we go.
I like it.
Yeah. Maybe 20. Give me a couple more years before I got to fully pay you to send you guys on a trip to Greece. Give me a couple more years. Okay.
20.
All right. Fair enough.
That's fair. That's totally
fair. It's fair. It's totally fair.
I'm looking forward to that.
I could also say real quick, it also speaks to the testament of the kind of people that we get the pleasure of communicating with at Kitcaster, right? And their organization, because we've had both now Ryan and Brandy on, and just hearing about how intentional they are, using that word intent again, right? How intentional, because Ryan was very clear about that too when he was on the show. It was just such a breath of fresh air, I guess you'd say, in today's industry, right?
I mean, I do remember him saying one thing about putting scissors through somebody's throat or something. So he is human.
I'm trying to focus on the positive intent.
Right? It is. I'm just saying, like, I want to make sure it doesn't sound like,
Yes. And the guilty intent, by the way, is not a criminal offense, just in case you're wondering. If we're going to throw around those, again, we can assume the positive intent because the criminal intent is.
It's funny, though, you mentioned that about like what a reflection. So this is where I'll wrap us up. So it's kind of just a build on what you said about the assumed positive intent that was so important for you to share. I will say the build on that is my computer is down. So I'm filming on this other camera today, folks. I could log on or I could guess on some of the guests who have come through and that we've absolutely loved. And I bet you I would guess several were from Kitcaster because that's been the quality of who ends up here, who shows up here. And so isn't that amazing how one of their values, their core values, shows up all the way to the guests? But absolutely, they're doing some awesome work over there. So I'm so glad that they are part of our world.
Yes. Awesome stuff. Awesome stuff there.
Well, friends, we always say, if you're listening,
keep listening.
You've been listening to the Serial Entrepreneur Show, produced by the team here at Smart Cooking Media.